Everyone, this is Jay Stein, and this is the Intelligent Investor Chart of the Week on the DevyRail YouTube channel. And what we do every week is we take a look at different fantasy football charts and talk about whether your favorite dynasty assets are buys, sells, or holds. And today we're going to talk about why I think right now is a great time to buy Diontae Johnson in dynasty fantasy football. Let's get to work. Yeah, hey guys. Thanks so much for watching. Welcome back. So my process again is about talking about KTC versus fantasy points per game. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at these players' KTC charts and look at their past prices and sort of what that would tell us about what the future prices could be of these each player's fantasy charts. So KTC, what is it? It's a KeepTradeCut. It's a website that uses crowdsourcing by asking people that visit the site whether they'd keep, trade, or cut certain players. And they have an algorithm given those responses that they come up with values, and they use that in their rankings and their trade calculators. It's basically a sentiment indicator. But what we're going to do here is we're going to look at a graph here of Diontae Johnson. So this is what's going on in the graph, right? So this blue line, this solid blue line that's moving up and down, that is Diontae Johnson's price over the past 3 years, since April of 2020. And you can see that his chart was sort of, that blue line moves up and down and up and down. That's what his KTC prices have been throughout those past years. And there's a red dashed line that's going through the middle. That's his average KTC over this time. And then there's one above and one below, those blue dashed lines. Those are one standard deviations for this series. So the point there is that nearly 70% of all the observations should be within those two bounds. So when you see the blue line moving closer to one of the blue dashed lines, you'd expect it to bounce off those lines and move back towards the center, and vice versa if it was going the other way. When you're spending time outside of those blue bands, that's when things get a little bit extended, either on the buy side or the sell side. And if you're going to the bottom, you're thinking, is there going to be a new price regime here? So you can see Diontae Johnson's sort of added the low over the past 3 years here. From a price perspective. This red solid line, that's the 150-day moving average. That's something I brought in with last week's Cam Akers chart. And that's basically just going to give me, it smooths everything out, and it gives me buy and sell trigger points, right? So when the blue line crosses through the red line is a watch item, and that's when you'd expect some sort of price movement, either to the upside or the downside. So you can see right now, the blue line sort of below the red line, and what we'd be looking for is when do those two lines cross. So the purple bars here, those indicate when the fantasy season is. So that's when you're in season and earning fantasy points. So that's week 1 through 17 or weeks 1 through 18 for 2022 and 2021. And the white area is off season. So that's the actual NFL playoffs, the off season. So the draft and the combine and free agency and mini camps and all that stuff. So you can kind of get an idea of how his price moves during season versus out of the season using those purple bands there. So I wanted to talk about Diontae because first off, I think he's a huge buy right now. And secondly, it's one of the guys I've been most wrong on. He was one of my first buys in my Intelligent Investor series on the Dynasty Nerds. That was back in February of 2021 when I first published a buy on him. And his price at that time was $53.50. You can kind of see about where that is last off season. If you go off a little bit from that second purple bar, that's about where is that 53.50 is right where it was. And you can see basically since I made that recommendation to buy, his chart has basically been on a steadily decline path all the way down to where it is right now, around 39.75, or call it 4,000 KTC. He blew through his 150-day moving average, and then he checked up to that in the first month of the 2022 season, and then just fell off again, and fell all the way to the sort of the lows around 4,000. So, fell through that -1 standard deviation. So this is a cheap chart, that one that I got wrong. And from a fundamentals perspective, what I think I see is, from a PE perspective, I think Diontae should be in that 15 to 17 fantasy points per game range, which I think deserves a PE of around a 38, which is what his compare group would line up in. And right now, Diontae is currently trading at a PE of around 29. And so that's about a 9-turn discount from a PE perspective versus where his peers are trading. So if you sort of make up the difference between what the peers are and versus what he's trading at now, I think that puts him at a price target around 52.50, which is about 30% upside from current levels. So, if you remember back to my original buy recommendation, it was at 53.50. And I actually am just putting a price target of 52.50. Now, if you go back to this chart and you look and you see his average line is right around 4,900. So I'm actually pretty high on Diontae, given the fundamentals and where I think he can get, that I think that his price chart could go above what the average line is. Now, from a charting perspective, pure charting perspective, what you'd want to see is this blue line move up over above the solid red line, his 150-day moving average. And then you'd also want to see it cross through that bottom standard deviation line. So that's the 4,400-ish KTC. And that's going to give you the clear buy signal. But what I'm saying right now from a fundamental perspective is that I think you can buy right now. I think we've bottomed. And that's just an opinion of mine. That's how I read the fundamentals versus this chart. But if you were going to be a true do what the chart tells you, you'd probably want to wait until his price gets up above that 4,400 KTC level before you get the all clear. And you'd still have plenty of upside from 4,400 to the 5,250 that I can think you can get to, or maybe even higher. So why do I believe from a fundamental perspective that Diontae Johnson should be trading at higher levels? And so I'm going to start with something that many people have brought up to light on Twitter here. But for the 2022 season, Diontae Johnson had 147 targets, 86 catches, 882 yards, and 0 touchdowns. 0. Goose egg. Nilch. Nada. None. The story here is I think there's going to be some reversion there. So in 2021, he had 8 TDs. In 2020, he had 7 TDs. In 2019, he had 5 TDs. And I repeat, in 2022, he had 0 TDs. So I'm not sure. I haven't exactly looked this up, but I saw a bunch of people tweet about it. But I think it actually might be the first time that we've seen somebody go for 147 targets and actually put up 0 TDs. So I think that there's a reversion play here in terms of, next year, I think he scores more than 0 touchdowns. The other thing I look at is target share. I pay a little attention to it. So in 2022, he ended the year with a target share of around 27%. And I think that's really good. That's really good. In 2021, that target share was around 29, just under 29%. And so the 27%, 29%, kind of in the same range. I think he can be in that mid 20s to high 20s range. And I think that fits in well with the, 15 to 17, if not even more fantasy points per game. So, from a fundamentals perspective, I think this is pretty good. Now, there are rumors out there, about him deleting some of his Steelers stuff off of Twitter. And, I don't know anything about that. I don't know what that means for next year, but I'm fairly confident if he's on the field playing, that he's going to probably put up fantasy points at a good clip, right? So from a trade perspective, how are we thinking about this? I like to practice something called compounding. I talk about it a lot in my series. It's basically when you think about compound interest. So, you put money in an account, it earns interest. And then, the next time it earns interest, it's earning money on your original principal that you put in, plus the money that you earn, the interest that you got from that. So you're sort of earning money on money. And that's the kind of thing that I want to try and do in Dynasty Fantasy Football. So, what we're trying to do here is what we'd be looking for guys that have the same projected fantasy points per game, but are much further down on the price curve. So, they're going to be in that 15 to 17% fantasy, or 15 to 17 fantasy points per game range, but they trade at a much, much lower price. and then you can trade the 2 assets and then collect extra. So a little bit of draft capital, a little bit of plus more, whatever that plus more is. And then you take that plus more and you create more plus more with it. And so that's where that sort of compounding effect comes from. So, one idea here from a trade perspective is you could take Devonta Smith, who sort of averages in that same fantasy points per game range, but trades at more than 1,000 points higher than what Diontae Johnson trades at currently. So you could take Devonta Smith plus equals Diontae Johnson plus a 2023 second round pick. And that second round pick is the plus more. That's what you can actually do more stuff with. And the point there is that you'll be earning similar fantasy points per game, and you're getting a little bit of extra on top of it. Some other ideas, that was more of along the compounding line. Here's a couple more. So like Dameon Pierce is one of the names that I have on my top sells list. You could take Dameon Pierce for Diontae Johnson plus some. It's not as much as a second, but you can get a little bit more there. Or you could take Dalvin Cook and trade him straight up for Diontae Johnson. And I think with the sort of aging running back and of Dalvin Cook and maybe what happens next year in the offseason, I think Diontae would be more of a safer bet, even though we're not exactly sure what's even going to happen with Diontae. So that's it. I think Diontae Johnson's is a buy. I think his price should be around $5,250, which is about 30% upside. And if you want to be safe, you can wait until that 4,400 range on the KTC basis before you start buying. But I think it's okay to start buying now. Thanks again so much for watching. Let me know who you want to see next week in the chart of the week. And please like, comment, and subscribe to down below here. And if you're not already, if you want to join the Debbie Royal Patreon, there's some great guys there. You'll learn a ton. You should definitely do it. And if you want to ask me anything, you can find me on Twitter at _Jason Stein. And my series, The Intelligent Fantasy Football Investor, is on the Dynasty Nerds. There's no paywall. Please, there's a link below. Please go and click, and there's 12 volumes and take a look at them. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and appreciate it, and see you again next week.